Welcome to Panola Pride this Thursday, August 1st, and our guest this morning, as usual on Thursday, is Mrs. Leila Bell Lagrone. And we have a few announcements from the jail this morning. She says the cataloging of the genealogical books continues and that their shelves are really filling rapidly. They've had many visitors to come and see the jail, and all are very surprised to see a very busy library in operation, which we're glad to have it that way.
Almost more than we can take care of.
Don't know why they'd be surprised. That's absolutely correct. Mrs. Lagrone tells me that she's been searching for something very appropriate for Rodeo Week this morning, and that she has found just the thing, just the right hero.
Well, I looked through my files on outlaws and robbers and jailbreakers, and finally settled on one that's in the news, a man that is not any of those things, but a very unusual person that is in the news right now, and many people do not know about him. And this is Moses Rose, who escaped from the Alamo. All of my early years, I was taught that no one escaped the Battle of the Alamo except some women and children. And then I began to see hints that a man named Rose did leave the Alamo just a very short time before it was killed. All of them were killed, and he came out of it alive. I didn't give much credence to the story when I first stumbled on it. But in 1987, I was doing a little research in the Service League Library, Sammy Brown Library, and ran into an old Texas almanac that gave the story of Moses Rose, dated 1873. And it was the first-hand report of the story told by people who had helped the man. And I was really fascinated. So I did all the research I could in 1987 on it and wrote a couple of columns about it at that time, because I accepted the fact that it was a true story. And since then, I've been most interested in any other developments concerning Moses Rose. And the story goes like this. He was a French immigrant who came in the 1820s, in 1827 or 8, something like that, to Nacogdoches. And there he stayed for a time, lived in the Nacogdoches area, because that was a pretty busy Mexican town, really. Not many Anglos in it, but Mexican town. And as in the late 20s and into the 1830s, you see, the Anglos from the United States were coming in. And a family came into that area who lived at St. Augustine, in the St. Augustine area, and their name was Zuber. Mr. Zuber met Rose and became friends with him at Nacogdoches. Mr. Zuber lived at St. Augustine. I give you that to explain why he eventually came back to Mr. Zuber's. They became great friends. He was not married. He was a single man. And James Bowie came in about that time, and of course his name we know well in
Very
history.
familiar one, yes.
And he became good friends with Moses Rose. In fact, Moses Rose admired him so much, he journeyed with him through Texas to San Antonio. And there they were at the time of the story of the Alamo. He served as Jim Bowie's aide. Now, we know by the story of the fall of the Alamo that Jim Bowie was ill and on a cot.
Right.
The last big scene we know of that they had publicized there. But up until that time, he had been a loyal aide to Jim Bowie. But they had been, at the time the story begins about Rose and seriousness, they had been under bombardment for 3 days. And they were just about crazy, you know, from so much noise. The noise of battle, I'm told, will
sure
just run you
that's
crazy.
absolutely true. You don't think about that, but I
Right.
know.
It does just rob your mind. You can't think with it, just a constant bombardment. Well, this had been going on day and night for 3 days, and suddenly all was silent. Mexicans stopped their bombardment and sent in a demand, surrender or perish. And it was during that time that we have the famous story of the line drawn in the sand. Now, Moses Rose was one of those in the Alamo at that time, and Colonel Travis was in charge. And in the quiet time, he called them all, into a group or a line or wherever they could hear him anyway, get them all in close. And he made his famous farewell address. We have tried everything, gentlemen, and it's all failed. We will not get any help. We are doomed. And I want you to know that you either stay with us and face death or go outside and face death. There's no way out of it. And I have trusted in the soldiers coming to our aid, but even my messengers sent out for them have not come back. So now the net is too tight. There are too many Mexican soldiers around this fort for anybody to get through. So we're doomed. And as far as I'm personally concerned, I mean to stay here and fight as long as I have breath. And I'd like to know how many of you would decide to do that rather than to go out and face them head on, because you won't get through the lines. And and they drew the line in the sand, of course. It's famous to history. Okay. Quickly the men began to jump over the line. I'll fight for my country to the death and all this. And even James Bowie on the cot, of course, the story says he had him to lift his cot over the line. That's one of the fascinating things about that story. All of this we've known from history all the time. But what we have not actually been acquainted with is the fact that everybody went across that line except Moses Rose. And Jim Bowie, he just sat with his head down, and sat down in the sand with his head down. And Jim Bowie, from his cot, said, Rose, it looks like you're not interested in dying with us. And he said, no, I'm not ready to die. And I don't mean to do it unless I have to. And he looked around over the group, and he thought to himself, he had done more daring things than scaling that wall. He could get out of there. How far he'd go, he didn't know.
But it was worth a try.
Worth a try, he decided. And so he looked them all over, and without another word, grabbed a bundle of his dirty clothes that needed laundry. They hadn't been able to launder any clothes, and he had them tied up in a bundle. Threw them over the wall. They landed right among dead Mexicans on the other side of the wall. And he was an athletic person, and he leaped to the top of the wall, looked back one time, jumped down on the other side among the dead Mexicans, grabbed up his bundle, and left the hillside. He made it to the river, and of course went all night, slipping through. And he did slip through the lines. Of course, Texas was a wild country. It still is in the desert areas.
Right.
And he was a long ways from anybody he knew at Nacogdoches or St. Augustine. But he headed in that general direction, traveling mostly by night. And he ran into cactus thickets that just ate him up. And I don't think I'd ever read a story before that told the real damage that cactus thorns could do to you. But they cause infections, I'm told, that can kill a person. And so he traveled for weeks, hiding out and pulling as many thorns out of himself as he could and running into others in the night until his
Chills.
legs were swollen and bleeding all the time. And he finally stumbled into the home of his friend, Mr. Zuber, at St. Augustine.
You mean he went all the way from San
All
Antonio
the way from
to
St. Augustine from San Antonio.
good heavens, it takes
by
7
himself.
hours in the car.
Yes, it's a long drive from here to San Antonio. And of course, St. Augustine is way over, a little further over. He made this on foot with no help at all. So he started out a husky man, but by then he was nearly starved to death, thin and full of sores. And they took him in, and the story says that he stayed with them 3 weeks. They pulled out as many thorns as they could, and said it pulled out chunks of flesh and blood flowed. But they had to and then they used all of the salves, the home remedies they could. That's all they had. But they did keep him alive. He was just nearly dead. They kept him alive. Now, this story was not told until 1871. This was in 1836. And the Zubers are the ones that told it. And they gave the information to the publishers of the early copies of Texas Almanac. And Texas Almanac didn't publish it for 2 years after they got it because it sounded like such a far-fetched story, right? But they had affidavits, and the younger man who turned it in had his mother's affidavit that the story was true. He had told it word for word over and over until they'd all memorized the story. But they said that he left them then after about 3 weeks when he was able to walk again. Went back to his home area at Nacogdoches, and they heard by grapevine that he died soon after. So the story as it was told in Texas Almanac ended there. That's what I found in 1987. Since then, by communing with other people, with the historians from Center, Mr. Taylor is my friend and a cousin of our greatest family. Actually, his wife was an Alexander. And he gave me the hint that they thought they'd found his grave and that there was more to the story, see? So I began to dig. And they have found in Ferguson Cemetery, about 10 miles from Logansport, the grave they think is his. And they have been now, since then, authenticating their information. And it is in Louisiana, over the line in Louisiana. So the DeSoto Parish Historical Commission has gotten in on it. And just last week or week before, and I couldn't lay my hands on that clipping. I will find it, but somebody sent me the clipping of the Logansport newspaper telling that they are applying for a Louisiana state. We apply for Texas state historical markers. A Louisiana state historical marker to go by his grave in Ferguson Cemetery. And so they think, and in fact are pretty sure, that he changed his name to Ferguson. He worked on Ferguson's farm, changed his name to Ferguson, married and reared a family.
After that?
After all of the other story that had come out.
Well, is the Ferguson Cemetery, is it toward Shelby County then? It's
between, yes. It's between Logansport and Joaquin, back in the country back there. Now, some of our people have been to it, and I'd like to go just for the novelty of it, but of course it's just a lost cemetery, I think, and they've found this, and it won't be lost now if they get a marker there. But strange stories in history are being unearthed all the time.
Well, I suppose there was really no way for that story to spread other than that friend back in St. Augustine.
That's the only way.
Killed.
Only way, because he got out, and the women and children that left the Alamo after all of the men were killed didn't know what became of him. They thought he was killed in the Alamo.
Mm-hmm.
He was reported when the death list was published of the Alamo. His name was on the list
Mm-hmm.
because all the people that knew he ran over the wall
Assumed he was killed.
well, they died.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't there to tell the story.
Right.
His story's the only one that wants to tell.
Well, isn't that interesting? I do think this was a very appropriate story for Rodeo Week, since we're going to have the gunfight today.
Yes, I thought that.
Noon.
Because these were rugged individuals, and this one more story of the glory of the Alamo. And by the way, I think television has redone the 13 Days to Glory this week. My television hasn't been operating, so I haven't seen it, but I notice it's on the schedule that this week they have rerun 13 Days to Glory, which is the story of the Alamo, of course, of the Battle of the Alamo. Well, Moses Rose. Now what I'm interested in, and I don't know if I can get anything on it, is whether this Moses Rose could have possibly been related to the Old Man Rose of Caddo Lake.
Right. Well, you'll have to investigate and find that out and come back and tell us.
That's another story, and I would like to know, because there weren't all that many roses.
Right.
And he's called, this other Mr. Rose is called the Lion of the Lakes, you know,
Right.
of Caddo Lakes. And I don't know. It looks like if there had been a connection there, he'd have gone that direction instead. But the Zubers had been his friends. And imagine wandering in the dark across the wastelands of Texas.
I can hardly even stand to listen to that. Well, thank you for sharing this wonderful story with us this morning here on our beginning rodeo day. It was very appropriate.
Thank
and we
you.
enjoyed hearing it.
Well,
And
it's fun to recap it because, as I've said before, I have them by the dozens and dozens.
I know
and
you
scores.
do. I'm beginning to agree that your stories are endless, and we enjoy hearing them all. Thank you for joining us this morning for Panola Pride. And until in the morning at this same time, thank you very much.